Today I'm going to show you how to make this into this. This skirt is super beginner friendly, only requires one body measurement, and only has straight sewing lines. Fear not, you can do this one. First, take your hip measurement. This will be the basis for all the other measurements described in the list on the right. Next, cut out all of your pieces. Then iron the interfacing to the top of the first tier on the wrong side of the fabric. Next, hem the lining fabric. Fold up the bottom edge by 1/2 centimeter or so and press. Then fold up again so that the raw edge is enclosed in the fold, and then sew the hem in place with a straight stitch about 1/2 centimeter from the folded edge. Press the seam when finished. Attach the lining to the top of the first tier. This is the part of the first tier that has the interfacing. Do this by putting the lining and the first tier right sides together and attaching with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Attach the first contrasting strip to the bottom of the first tier with a French seam. They should be the same length, so no gathering should be necessary. However, if, like me, you cut the tiers from multiple pieces in order to get the required full length, then you should sew them together now. Gather tiers 2 and 3 by sewing a long basting stitch about 1/2 centimeter from the top edge, then pulling on one of the threads. If your thread is fragile and breaks easily, you can put in 2 lines of stitching right next to each other. A basting stitch is the longest length straight stitch that your machine will do. Quick side note, pressing is so important. Honestly, never skip this step because you'll regret it later when your garment looks sloppy and homemade. I make clothes because I love the craft of fashion, but I don't want my clothes to look homemade. Out of respect for the craft, I try to make my clothes look as high quality as possible. Pressing is essential in achieving this goal. I think every beginner sewist underappreciates pressing until they make enough things that just look bad with wonky seams. But don't let this be you. Never skip pressing. First, press the stitches in place the way that you sewed them, and then flip the seam whichever way you want it to ultimately lay and press again. Using a clapper for this step helps tremendously. A clapper is that wooden thing that you see me moving along the seam after I'm pressing. Okay, end of rant. Don't hesitate to take a quick cookie break even if you and your husband are supposed to be on a diet. How else are you supposed to sew past midnight? Attach the rest of the layers in order. Second lace tier, second contrasting strip, and bottom tier. Use a French seam for all. There are plenty of videos on YouTube for how to do a French seam if you don't already know, but I also plan to make one soon, so if you're watching this in the future, maybe I'll have a link to it above. Now you should have a large rectangle made up of multiple tiers, some gathered. Close the side seam so that the rectangle becomes a tube. Now you're going to sew the elastic channel. Flip the lining over the top of the first tier so that the wrong side of the lining is facing the wrong side of the first tier. Fold the seam allowance toward the lace tier and fold the lace tier down by 5 centimeters. This creates a channel for your elastic that is 5 centimeters wide. Sew this down 1/2 centimeter from the stitch line of the lining. At this point, the lining should be hanging down on the inside of the skirt. Only the lining seam allowance is caught inside the channel. Sew around the channel but leave a gap of about 10 centimeters so that you can thread the elastic through. Put a safety pin on one end of the elastic and thread it through the opening. Attach the other end of the elastic to the channel at the opening so that it doesn't slip through while you're doing this. Once you have the elastic through the channel, attach the 2 ends together and close the channel by finishing the stitch line along the 10 centimeter gap you left open. Make sure the gathering is evenly distributed around the elastic and that the elastic is laying flat. Put a few pins in to ensure the gathering stays more or less even. This step makes for a cleaner waistband that stays flat and holds the gathers in place. Then stretch and sew 2 lines of stitching along the elastic. And that's it. Here's the final look. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, check out any of my other videos in the Sew It From Scratch series. Until next time.